Lex Imperialis is Rogue Trader's second major story expansion, and it tackles the most terrifying nightmare in all of Warhammer 40k, Imperial Bureaucracy. Over the course of its roughly 16-hour campaign, you'll chase down shady conspiracies, team up with a grizzled Arbites agent and his adorable murder-mutt, and try your hand at a new Overseer class that lets you command a variety of weird but wonderful minions like the Psyber-Raven. So, where does Lex Imperialis shine? Where does it stumble? And most importantly, should you play it? Before we dive into the deep end, let's address the real burning question. The one this entire review hinges upon. Can you pet the dog? Greetings and welcome, friends. I'm Ash, and yes, you can indeed pet the dog. Though in true Rogue Trader fashion, you'll need to pass a skill check or risk getting your fingers chewed off. But that's a small price to pay for giving the good robo-dog a nice good head pat. Alright, now let's talk bugs, the technical kind and not the alien ones. Rogue Trader has had its fair share of them in the past, so how does the expansion hold up? Surprisingly, very well. Across my entire playthrough, I only ran into two issues. One bug that stopped me from interacting with the environment, and another that prevented me from moving through a newly opened path. Both were very easily fixed by reloading a save. And aside from that, everything else ran without a hitch. And considering how Owlcat's games tend to be a bit wobbly even at the best of times, mostly due to their gigantic size, that is a genuinely impressive achievement. Another thing that really stood out to me is just how seamlessly Lex Imperialis integrates into the main campaign. It's not some disconnected side story tacked onto the mid-game. In fact, if I didn't know what the DLC contained, I'm not sure I could have told you where it begins or where it ends. Okay, that is a slight lie. The expansion does come with a noticeable jump in production value, so I may have figured it out just based on the sudden influx of new cutscenes. The story itself kicks off near the end of Act 1, when a swarm of Arbites descends upon Rykard Minoris and sends a pretty strong message by immediately imprisoning the planetary governor, mostly for being completely useless. This is where you meet your new companion, Solomorne, a man of hard convictions, fast actions, and, very occasionally, a soft center, though mostly when it comes to his loyal cyber mastiff Glaito. I'll be honest here, I really didn't care for Solomorne at first. He felt like he was trying way too hard to cosplay Judge Dredd, and it all came off a bit stiff. But after spending some more time with him, I really came to appreciate his no-nonsense approach. He was very rarely wrong in how he sized up a situation. And even if I didn't follow the rules to the very letter, he was content to tag along as long as I upheld the actual spirit of the law. And for a character that easily could have ended up being a boring stereotype, I really enjoyed these moments where his human side peeked through. They were subtle and fleeting, but they gave him just enough nuance to make him feel like more than a walking badge with a shotgun. After all, he did also have a dog. A dog you sadly cannot get even if you choose the new Overseer archetype. It's not all that bad, however, as you can get some very bizarre and very useful familiars instead. You can get a Cyber Eagle, a Psyber-Raven, or a Servo Skull Swarm. Solomorne's Glaito is a line breaker that loves to chew on snipers and backline casters. The Cyber Eagle is fragile but hits like a truck if you can line up a good attack. The Psyber-Raven amplifies a Psyker's power and spreads them to nearby targets. And the Servo Skull Swarm is all about buffing allies, debuffing enemies, and generally being a big ol' nuisance. These familiars are not full party members, but their impact can still be enormous. This is because they primarily use their master's action points for their own abilities, and those do not count as attacks. So you can have Glaito first soften someone up, and then follow up with Solomorne to smash them into a wall with a shotgun blast, or just by using a big ol' shield. And that's a lot of damage. They are a fantastic addition to the roster. Maybe slightly overtuned, but you won't hear me complain as many of the DLC fights were honestly kinda tough. Even on Daring, which is just one step above normal, I was regularly losing team members. Now mind you, that is not a complaint either. Quite the opposite actually. I may be a bit rusty, but I really felt like the combat throughout Lex Imperialis hit that sweet spot. Not too easy and not too punishing, but rather just enough to be really entertaining. Unlike some of the missions from the main campaign, there's also no filler here. You're never just fighting 4 random thugs loitering in the middle of the street. Nearly every encounter has some interesting set piece or mechanical twist you have to work around. My personal favorite, a fight where I was hopelessly outnumbered, but I had access to a massive tank. The whole battle revolved around keeping the tank operational, cutting off enemy reinforcements, and naturally turning wave after wave of lunatics into a delightful red mist. Funnily enough, a lot of that action is wrapped up in a story that is a lot more grounded, at least at first. Since it revolves around the Adeptus Arbites, much of the early focus is on safeguarding the Imperial Tithe, a mega tax that every single planet has to pay in both resources and manpower. It is the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that sounds very dull and dry, and for a little while, I must admit I was genuinely worried. But credit where it's due, Lex Imperialis does not stay grounded for very long. After one mission, you're already being knee-deep in classic rogue trader nonsense. We're talking strange cults, shady conspiracies, moral dilemmas, and bizarre events that I would love to tell you about, but sadly cannot due to spoilers. What I can say is that once the DLC gets going, it really hits all the right notes. My favorite part of it was visiting Thessera, a feudal world where society has regressed back to knights, castles, and cobblestone streets. They've lost access to advanced technologies, and since they're not strategically important, the Imperium never really bothered to come back and uplift them. So now you have this weird planet full of people living medieval lives, while awkwardly trying to wield half-functioning Imperial technology that they barely even understand. It is a great contrast that really gives the world a very fun and distinct flavor. Thessera also happens to be the biggest chunk of the DLC, with a sprawling map full of interesting things to stumble upon and characters to chat with. Once I got there, all of my early doubts melted away. The storyline that unfolds on Thessera is hinted all throughout your time there, and while I won't spoil anything, I will say that I still managed to get surprised by the very end. Part of that surprise was also due to how quickly the story wrapped up, and that is a pattern across this whole DLC. Each mission is set up well and really pulls you into its own mini-narrative, but all of them feel like they're missing that extra 30 minutes to 1 hour to really let things sink in. This was especially true on the second planet. It set up a great premise, built up some solid intrigue, and then, just as I was getting into it, I was whisked away to a tiny room to make my final decision. Now this is not a deal breaker by any means, but it is a real shame because the stories in Lex Imperialis really are strong. They just needed a bit more time and a bit more space to truly breathe. Even if some of the story arcs feel a bit short, the choices you get to make along the way felt significant. Not all of them have immediate consequences, but many carry long-term implications. And that kind of weight on your decisions has very real roleplay value in my book. What I don't know is how the heretical path diverges from the good guy one. Lex Imperialis takes place across 4 chapters, which, if you've played the base game, you'll know is a lot of content. So there just wasn't enough time for me to replay everything from a Chaos Worshipper's perspective. That said, I can very easily see how the scenarios could unfold differently if you really lean into the role of a heretic. So hopefully the actual result is just as cool as it is in my head. As for the actual writing that ties all of it together, no surprises here. It is excellent across the board. It is sharp and intense when it needs to be, surprisingly touching at times, and absolutely hilarious when it wants to be. So if you're like me and you love poking around every corner and talking to every weirdo you find, you'll be happy to hear that Lex Imperialis rewards that curiosity with some great moments. I especially love the courtroom segments, where the Adeptus Administratum tasks you with presiding over a series of, honestly, just ridiculous legal cases. These not only give you a range of clever, logical, and sometimes unhinged options with rather interesting consequences, but they're also a perfect showcase of Imperial bureaucracy at its absolute worst. Did you know you can get executed if your family failed to go through the 30-year process of registering your birth? Because, in the eyes of the Administratum, if you don't have the paperwork proving you exist, you might as well be atomized just to keep the ledgers nice and tidy. It is peak Warhammer 40k nonsense, and I would be lying if I said I didn't love every single second of it. I also have to praise the ending here. No spoilers, of course, but let's just say that having to claw my way through a mountain of red tape just to see justice done left me absolutely seething with rage. I have not been this pissed off at a video game character in ages, but in a weird way, that's actually a compliment. It means I was so invested in the story that I took every brazen insult and smug lie very, very personally. And honestly, that's the real magic of Owlcat's games. They're not just a collection of random fights and lore dumps. They actually make you feel things, be they good or bad. And that sort of thing really sticks with you long after the credits have rolled. While I would have loved for it to be just a bit longer, I had a great time with Lex Imperialis. And really, that's no surprise. It's more Rogue Trader, just with a higher production value and a tighter focus. So if you enjoyed Owlcat's previous work, or if you're a fan of story-rich CRPGs in general, then I do believe I can comfortably recommend Lex Imperialis. And if you're not, all I can really say is, why are you watching a review for an RPG expansion? Oh, and one last thing, and this one is not part of the review itself. The Steam Summer Sale is just around the corner. So if you're thinking of grabbing both of Rogue Trader's expansions, maybe hold off a few days to see if the Season Pass gets a discount. I've seen it hit 50% off before, so with just a tiny bit of patience, you might just snag yourself a pretty good deal. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, hit the stupid bell, bet your Cyber Falcon, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for sticking to the very end, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye!